Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
Mafia Definitive Edition.
Yeah.
More from the Mafia franchise. Why is that in the description from Xbox? It can't start that, can it?
Well, chronologically, I don't really know how it all works, as we'll get into, but
Yeah, I know it all works.
they can kind of get away with it, I think.
Uncover the origins. Is this recording? Yeah. Uncover the origins of organised crime in Mafia, the old country. A gritty Why is this? This is the new one that's coming out in 2025. They're putting an ad in for that. Is this how the Mafia Definitive Edition page on Xbox starts? More from the Mafia franchise. Uncover the origins of organised crime in Mafia, the old country. A gritty mob story set in the brutal underworld of 1900 Sicily. Coming 2025. Wishlist now. Okay. Just drop that in there. It's obviously been updated. About Mafia. Mafia Definitive Edition tells the story of Tommy Angelo, a hard-working cab driver who's scraping by in the American city of Lost Heaven, is it? Or Haven? I can't remember how they pronounce it.
Lost Haven.
Lost Haven. Circa 1930. One fateful night, Tommy has an inadvertent brush with the Italian Mafia that showcases a life of reward too big to ignore. Now he's embedded in a brutal underworld of organised crime, doing jobs for Don Salieri's organisation as it wars with the vicious Morello crime family. As Tommy, you'll have to establish yourself in Lost Haven's treacherous underworld, where all is not as it seems, including who your friends and foes really are. This is a complete overhaul of the original game that was released to widespread critical acclaim in 2002 and improves on the beloved classic in every way imaginable. That is a big statement.
I was going to say that's a wild assumption.
Considering they cut bits out of it, I don't think that's improving in every conceivable way imaginable. Sorry, that's their every way imaginable. That's their term. You don't cut bits out if that's the case. You do it all.
Well, it might be cut.
Rebuilt from the ground up, it's a faithful but expanded 4K and HDR-ready remake that not only makes dramatic improvements to the original's visuals and gameplay, but also builds upon its narrative and added new features like motorcycles and collectibles from 1930 city Lost Haven. It's got a load of other in there about players and mob. You're the lead in this cinematic mob story immersed in the world of organised crime during the Prohibition-era. A masterpiece remade. Definitive Edition is a faithful expanded remake inspired by the iconic 2002 original. Explore authentic vision of 1930s America in this expansive city in its crime-riddled underbelly. What are we doing here? Because this isn't... this came out, and I think it originally came out... We'll go back to the classic originally. This remake, or this definitive edition, was a Xbox One PS4 game. I don't think they've enhanced it too much. I don't. They might have done. I'm not sure if they enhanced it to 60 FPS. Maybe your eyes will be able to tell. No, yeah, exactly.
I'm almost certain, absolutely not.
I've played through it, and I'm sure it's still stuck in the mud there. Why has this happened? Is this because you saw this old country trailer and was like, oh, I'll have a look at that, or is it just you just saw it on Game Pass's little ads or whatever they throw up? I don't know how this has occurred.
Yeah.
It's annoying me.
So I have a periodic check of Game Pass because I spend a bloody fortune on it a month.
Snagging it off the other week.
Well, this is the thing. So without something like Game Pass, this absolutely wouldn't have got purchased, right? So, and it technically didn't get purchased.
No,
it got downloaded. So it's one that sort of appealed to me, like when I was looking through the description and the kind of trailer and stuff, because whenever I look at stuff like this, I sort of go, "Oh, 1930s Mafia style GTA," right? Which is an unfair comparison, right? You shouldn't be. From what I saw, I thought this has got some legs, a nice little sort of story, adventure, a little bit of open world jobby for me or whatever. It could be something good to play. So I thought, no bother picking this sort of stuff up, downloading it, and if after a couple of hours I'm not enjoying it, then it's one I can put down. But yeah, it pretty much was just because I saw it on there and I was like, it looks good, it looks playable, ticks all the boxes for something that I'd want to give a go. So it got started, but it wasn't something that I'd kind of pre-planned to play at any point. It was there at the right time, I think.
Wasn't queued up waiting with bated breath to play it. Did you finish it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a long game.
Yeah.
I remember it's like 10, 12, if that. I don't even know if it's that long, to be honest.
Yeah, so my time spent was about 13 and a half hours, I think, which is like fine. I could have probably gone back and done a few other free roam bits, but
it's not really good, that mode, in my view. It's not really made for that. And I think that's where people get tripped up at this, this GTA comparison. Like they see the outset of it and think, well, that's what that is, and then you get in there and it really is anything but in many ways, because it is, as they mentioned plenty of times in the fucking description, it's a narrative cinematic type game that happens to have a city that kind of lives and breathes, but you're going mission to mission, and maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. So you played this on the Series X. We think there's about 13 and a half hours dropped in there. Yeah. Any other relevant information required? I mean, there's no history of this franchise, as you alluded to. You don't know much about the 2002 classic, as they've...
Never played it. Never played any of the previous Mafias. So, from my perspective, it was a completely new experience for me.
Yeah. I played the 2002 original. I've played all of them, actually.
Wow.
So, I did play the 2002 on PC back in the day. And they're not wrong. At the time, it was one of my favourite games for many years. Like, it really was that good. But it is a product of its time. You go back and try and play that now, the controls are awful. Like, some of the design's pretty terrible. Yeah. There's just no modern, I don't want to say hand-holding, but amenities that make things enjoyable. It's still in that mode where it don't matter if it's fucking impossible. We're just going to shrug our shoulders and you have to get through it. Yeah. I think games these days are like, well, if you want the challenge, put the difficulty up. If you just want to get through it, there's an easy mode. And if you want a balance, there's a normal mode lurking. And, we'll help you out of checkpointing. We'll help you out of health items. This didn't have, as far as I remember, this didn't have checkpointing. So some of those missions you'd go on would be like 15, 20 minutes. And if you fucking blew it, you'd blow it. It's a bit of a shit show on the consoles, apparently. So that's one thing to notice. People that played it on that had a significantly different experience. It had lots of loading screens, wasn't seamless. Slow loading screens as well, like you're talking like minutes on end, whilst in a mission going into a building or something. So there was a definite difference between the PC and the console versions. Luckily, I had the Can
you imagine that?
I mean, yeah. That was I don't know that's common, but it was more prevalent than it is now. Nowadays... You're 50-50 with that PC version's going to have some stutter toilet or some other bloody issue. So you can't win either way. But it was a great game. And that put me onto Mafia 2 and Mafia 3. Played through those. Played through this Definitive Edition probably about 18 months. It's actually an episode up. I think it's called Family Business when we used to name them. And normally I'm against doing reruns, but I thought, fuck it. It's been long enough.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's difficult because if we did this again, this episode will be called Mafia Definitive Edition. What would the next one be called? Because the naming convention's gone. At least Family Businesses. Yeah, that suggests it wasn't finished. Mafia Definitive Edition again.
Yeah.
But then what if you want to do it a third time?
Again.
Maybe. I don't think we'll get to 3 times in most of these games, but I like Ronnie's thinking ahead already. Concerned about doing this. But anyway, enough about me and that. That's how it works. And then they did Mafia 2, did Mafia 3, then did Mafia Definitive Edition, remaking that 2002. As someone who had played the original, they definitely cut corners in certain ways, cut certain bits out. Maybe not the most exciting stuff, so perhaps that's why they did it. But it's not a like for like remake. But if I was to say play one now in 2024, you've not played either. You can't recommend that 2002. It's just one of those games that was a product of its time, like a Metal Gear Solid or a GTA back in the day. Like you go back and play those with the face buttons doing stuff. And you're like, what's all this about? So some of these games from like the late 90s to I'd say the mid 2000s, there's struggle in there to go back to and play. You look
There's
at something
too many
Gears of-
things.
Yeah, there are
there's
too many
there's way
things.
too many things that have come, and there's even things that I would argue that are still in this game that I have come to expect better from. That I don't much care for, and it does completely sour the experience, I think, in some ways when you go back, and that you kind of, there's things in modern games that you just take for granted that are there, and when you go and play games that are older, it highlights how much of a pain those quality of life bits and just controls and certain expectations of games in how they behave and what you need to do and direct you have changed so much that it does make it really difficult, unless you're specifically into your retro gaming, to go back and sort of play them and enjoy them to the same sort of level you would have done back in the day.
Even that, though, like a 2D retro game is infinitely more playable than a 3D retro game because it was solved and it hasn't really changed, is it? 2D, apart from making it a bit easier, maybe, and checkpointing, 2D games generally got it right in the late 80s and 90s. 3D, they were fucking about for almost a decade trying to suss things out. And even today, I play stuff that's released and I think, you haven't sussed it out yet. And it's 2024 and that's new. So what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know what the game was that kind of really sussed it. I think it feels like GTA might have been the one that really kind of, in an open world format and how the buttons are arranged and certain mechanics, how you direct players, waypoints, how you start missions, and all that kind of stuff, feels like it was a bit of an evolution through there. But I'm sure there's other games that have come along and added their own little bits and elements into it, because GTA, for example, didn't have auto saving for a while. Like, you had to go to specific places to save it, and so I don't know. But yeah, there's still certain elements within this, and I don't know whether they've done it deliberately as a kind of hark back and a nostalgia piece to kind of the original. But I was sort of like, stuff that I wouldn't have expected. So when I played God of War, that was a 2020-ish game, wasn't it? That come out around that sort of time?
2021 or 2. It's in that ballpark.
So there's certain
God
things...
of War 2018 came out.
Yeah.
So it's in many ways some of the issues that you might draw between those two.
I mean, they're two completely separate games.
They are.
But it just goes to show you that it's not that old in terms of...
No,
like,
it's not. It's not that old.
how you expect certain things to perform.
It does feel slightly old, though, which is strange. Let's just touch on the narrative. We set out the basic premise. It is what it is. Like, you do start as that cab driver, Tommy, and it's kind of like a saga. It goes through... I don't know if it's a decade, but there's multiple years that the game kind of takes you through. So it's quite I liked that. I remember liking that kind of spin on it, because a lot of games take place within like 2 weeks, and then it's kind of, this is like an evolution of someone who started outside of the mob and then integrates their way in. It's how they sort of rise through the ranks. Yeah. What did you make of the narrative side of things and the characters? Do you find that it was well written? I mean, I'm not going to compare it to something like Goodfellas or even The Godfather. Like, it's not going to hit those sort of heights. I wouldn't have thought, but who knows? Is it an acceptable level where he's like, yeah, if I want my mob fixing game and this isn't a bad kind of narrative structure and beats to follow, and they've done a good job, at least in that area?
Yeah, generally. I mean, it's... You kind of, in a weird kind of way, I wish they'd have fleshed out some of the characters a little bit more. Like, I think the big problem with that is that you don't...
You cut bits out of it, innit?
Well, you cut bits out, but they've... Because I was trying to do a bit of reading about this afterwards, and apparently, like, his wife in it has got more of an active part in the newer one than she did in... So they've obviously messed around with it a little bit, but it's usually through doing side missions and things that you kind of get to explore characters that are outside of that sort of main arc. And even like the Dons, like you don't really get to know Don Morello that well at all, like, and what he's like, and he's just painted as the bad guy.
He's just an antagonist there for antagonist reasons.
Exactly, yeah. So you don't really get to feel any kind of anything for him, at least in my perspective. I mean, you kind of go, yeah, he seems like a bit of an horrible bastard, but beyond that, you don't really get any perspective of him. Don Salieri, who you're working for, you get a little bit more, but you still don't really get anything or any insight into him. Paulie and Sam, you get a little bit more from, and you kind of build up those relationships. They're kind of like your two best mates.
Forgot about Ralph.
Nah. Yeah, and then you know you got through. Well, you got various different characters, right? And it's fine, but I think I'd have just liked to have explored that in a bit more depth, considering it's a narrative-based game. But you know, to one of my points that I kind of made a note of was that it's a bit weird to me that it's kind of like got this huge world that you can. It's not like you go to different points and it's like, right, okay, go and start this mission. Like the way that the narrative is set up is that you're telling the story almost through acting out these flashbacks in the way that you're playing, and because of that you'll finish one mission, it will go straight on to the next one, and you're already in that setting for it. So it's very difficult for the game without it being 25 hours long and you basically having to do all of this filler that other people might not be interested in. It's difficult to expand on that, but I did like the basic premise of the kind of, as you say, starting off as a taxi, like cabbie, to basically becoming the main go-to man in this mafia.
Yeah, I think they did a decent job. I think the original is strong. They did cut. There's nothing major they cut out, but to your point, where you learn a bit more about the characters, there are a couple of like missions, like really what I'd call like docile missions, where you might be going to scope out a job before doing it. Whereas in this one, you just go and do it. The scoping out's minimised in some way, and it was mundane, like in 2002, because you sort of go and visit whoever's house, and you'll get on the train or you'll drive over to it. But during those moments, you're finding out more about that person, perhaps their insecurities or whatever. So whilst it gets away with it, it's interesting that you've had that kind of feeling where they didn't really give enough info on some of the background of some of these characters, and you don't get to know them as well as you'd like to. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of hear that. You said you got some notes there. I forgot to ask, did you categorise them, or have you just chucked out to it?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of tried to collect them together in what I thought were like the good bits.
You give me the headlines then, because I've dived in with narrative.
No, it's all good. So narrative was one of the things that I really liked, and I sort of noted that the voice acting I thought was on point. So in this one, it's a complete remake, right? So they haven't even got the same voice actors and actors for each of the characters. And I liked Tommy, I liked Paulie, and you know, the Dons and everything. I thought all of that was very good, and for a narrative game, clearly it's got to be. And I did know that generally character development for the way that they've done it is pretty good, but I would have just liked them to have got into, because you've got, I think he's called Vinny, who you go to basically to get all the weapons from. Yeah, and he seems like a bit of a mad bastard, right? And you kind of want to understand why he's in. I always kept thinking, like, I want to do a mission with Vinny. Like, I want him to start talking to me. I want to know what his backstory is. And you kind of feel like you never really scratch away at that too much. So the ones that they did do, I thought they did okay with, like, as you say, the ones you're closer to, but a little bit more on some of the more peripheral ones would have been good. And I have to say, like, the environment and like Lost Haven itself looks great. Like, it is a visually good looking game, and I think it very accurately captures that kind of 1920s to 1930s vibe really well. And you know, everything is of period, and there's, you know, even when you have the radio on, they're talking about like the Great Depression and you know, current affairs and things, and the tensions that are happening in Europe with obviously the war coming up. Like, so all those little things were quite good little nods towards it that I really liked. I thought they put a hell of a lot of detail into the cars. So there's a wide variety of cars with quite a wide variety of handling and performance stats and things like that, which I thought they didn't really need to do that, but they did. and it felt like they spent a lot of time making sure that those bits were right. Even though I felt like the speed of them was a bit unrealistic, perhaps. Like, you're sitting there doing 80, and you go, "Well,
Was that
would I have been
possible?
doing? Yeah, was that possible in this? I'm not too sure, but it is what it is. I thought that was good, and Lost Haven is just a really interesting setting with some diverse things going on. You've got like a Chinatown and a more rural part, and then the suburbs and stuff. So I thought they did a good job on the actual setting and the environment. I really enjoyed just sort of driving around and looking about, and all the weather effects were really good as well. So yeah, that was a really positive part of it. I liked the story. I genuinely found myself invested in kind of Tommy's tale, because the way that it starts off and the way that you're recounting your tale immediately kind of lets you know that this hasn't ended in a good way, right? Like, so you kind of want to know how it went south.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of always waiting for that, because everything is very much his rise.
Yeah.
So what you're waiting for is, well, what caused the downfall to get him to this point. So yeah, I found myself quite invested in that, and obviously the battle between the two Dons kind of intensifies as the story goes on, and figuring out who wins that battle and what comes off it and stuff was quite an interesting development. So I really did like the story. I always sort of like these sort of Italian gangster movies and series and stuff. They always are entertaining. So I'm glad that they kind of hit the notes on that. But that is pretty much what I wrote down as the pros, right? I liked the setting, I liked the detail, and I liked the story, which are pretty big things, right? They're not.
No, they're not throwaway. Well, some people they are throwaway, but
And I think those things are definitely what kept me playing it. But I do kind of feel like I've got a longer. And I don't know. Some of it kind of feels like I'm perhaps like nitpicking with it a little bit, but my list of cons kind of outweighs the list of pros in a weird kind of way. Not, we'll get into it at the end. I wouldn't necessarily say like overall but I've definitely got a longer list of bugbears and things that I would have liked to have seen in this game. But definitely those three things, kind of main things like graphics, acting, detail, story, are definitely huge plus points for it.
Did you have any technical issues with it, or was it pretty clean technically in terms of like crashes or glitches or stuff that you can't progress the mission or weird happenings? Because sometimes in these games that have it's set in a city that's open, but you are traveling mission to mission, but it does have that dynamic kind of, the traffic's always different, the pedestrians are different. You could fucking knock the car into a river or something. Like, there's stuff that can go wrong on route and during the missions. But did you have any actual like technical problems with it, other than its sluggish frame rate?
I think it might have been on like the last or second to last mission, but you're kind of in a chase. And basically I wasn't the one that, I was kind of waiting on another car to come along and kind of kick off what would be like the next part of it. But that car kind of like spun out, which was part of the setup, but just didn't kind of come back. And I was like, is this part? And it was on the first time I'd done it, so I was like, what's going on here? And I was on a motorcycle chasing them, so I've got like no protection, so I'm just getting shot the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I drove. Probably I've been driving for like 5 or 10 minutes at this point, chasing this car, waiting for Paulie and Sam basically to come and do the like shooting bit from the car, and they just didn't come. And in the end, I just got shot down. And I was like, I was sitting there thinking, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do then? Like, I can't do anything. Am I supposed to just follow them and somehow stay alive? Like, am I getting too close? Like, it was a bit unclear. But when I replayed it, like, Paulie and Sam spun out and then basically immediately come back. But generally speaking, it was few and far. But that's the only one that kind of comes to mind. And I don't know, that one was a bit weird. But generally, like, no, performance-wise, obviously it it's not the slickest running game. It's stuck at that what is now a poor 30 FPS, but it does look good. And it didn't I wasn't sitting there fundamentally thinking this is hurting like my experience. But yeah, generally, other than that, there was no kind of game crashes that I experienced or anything of the like.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Let's get these negatives reeled off then. Have a go.
Yeah.
Crap on it.
Right. So I'm just going to kind of go through my list, right? So the combat. And in combat, I mean like combat in the cars, combat in cover, combat out of cover, and physical combat, right? Are all fucking shit. There's no other word for it. It's normally it's pretty clear with these games. Like, am I meant to take the fight to them, or is this a cover shooter? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And it sometimes seems to straddle. It kind of wants you to take the fight to them, gives you a load of cover. For me, it's a cover shooter. Like, I don't see any other way of doing it. But it'll then like give you either random, like it'll give you a shotgun. Like, it wasn't until later as you get a bit further through the game, you start being able to pick up Tommy guns and stuff.
Yeah.
But predominantly it's giving you've only got pistols. You don't have a lot of ammo, I would say. And you kind of have to fight your way through it. And there's no real mechanism to understand exactly how you can avoid getting hit, right? And I found it just a bit inconsistent. Like, you can change some of the settings around giving it more help or being kind of free aim and stuff. But I was like, I'm just playing this as on the default settings.
Yeah.
It kind of puts you in the rough area, but you do find yourself having to like manually move the stick to shoot them. And you don't have a lot of health, right? And in the heat of battle, there's often quite a few enemies, and you're sort of fumbling around trying to get this aim on point. And I just find it a bit. It's not very precise, and there's no kind of clear method other than sort of just trying to pick your moments of when to shoot. And I just found it a bit rubbish. In the car, you're kind of doing the same thing, just sort of waiting for it to lock on and then holding the button. But we'll get onto the driving and shooting in a minute. But I didn't find it particularly good. And the hand-to-hand combat is just kind of a bit weird mix of just mashing punch whilst also trying to navigate quick time events to dodge. Like, it just felt very loose and not very exciting, I would say. And it got to the point where there's one mission where you're going through a prison, and I fucking hated it. Like, honestly, it just was. There's just enemies coming out of everywhere, and you're trying to find a good place to kind of take cover and where to run, because you're kind of like half trying to get out and half trying to.
Yeah.
And I just find
they're
the thing
coming
just
from like above as well. There's like multiple levels where you can shoot down. Yeah, I remember that being a pain in the ass.
Yeah, so I was kind of just, and it's not like you can take, like, pretty much for the good weapons you don't get a lot of ammo either.
You get like a couple of clips tops.
Yeah, so you kind of sometimes figuring out, and sometimes it takes like 10 shots with a Tommy gun, and sometimes it takes 2. Like, I just found it very inconsistent and a bit imprecise. And for a game from 2020, I expected a bit more from that. Like, that's one of the things that felt very dated to me, kind of more of a 2015-ish game, or even before that. Like, it just it felt very aged. So didn't much care for any of that combat, to be honest. The next part that I listed was driving. Now,
do you get speed tickets? I can't remember how it works in the remake. In the original, that was a thing. I think you can turn it off in both versions. But
yes. So there's a way that you can basically make it quite intrusive.
Yeah.
Or not intrusive at all. And I just went, look, I'll just leave it as it is. I'm not messing around with that. But yeah, basically I've heard that Mafia was quite famous for having this kind of like police element to it.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't really know this. So my assumption based on how you interact with police is based on GTA. So essentially, whenever my philosophy with this is you can set a speed limiter on the car. So you see the police come up on the minimap, and I just went, right, I'll just I don't want to be dealing with that. I don't want to. I'm already got enough stress trying to get to or from this mission. I'll put the brakes on and slow down. But apparently, yeah, you can get stopped, get out the car, they'll issue a ticket, and you kind of move on your way. But there's no concept of money in it, right?
No,
in this
not really.
game, so
It's mission to mission.
It's mission to mission, so I don't really understand what the point of that would be, other than just being an annoying inconvenience to the pace of the game. To be perfectly honest, if there was a concept of money or like failure or something like that, then I kind of get it. But because there isn't, I don't really know what value it's adding. Like there are a couple of times with the driving where I'd fucking obviously blow it going around a corner and absolutely mow someone down.
Yeah.
And the Rozzers would see it and then start that, and I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake! Like, then I'm just sort of running from the cops basically until they go, and then I'll carry on my merry way. But yeah, I didn't really. I just found it all a bit weird. I don't really know what value it's adding to this game, particularly having like. This is where I just get a bit confused by it. Like, it's got open world elements like that in this sort of living and breathing world where you've got the ability for police to pull you over in a police presence, but there's no incentive to explore that world, really. Like,
no,
it's just there. It's just an environment from A to B, as I can see it. So I was like, I just don't really get it, unless it was just a nod to the original. But I kind of feel like it'd be better without it. Like, I just don't. It seems like an unnecessary addition to a game like this, where
realism, immersion, authentic 1930s America, authentic
there's
cars.
Not really that many, and there's not really a it's not really a punishment to it. Like with GTA, if you get arrested, you lose all your stuff and you lose money, and then you kind of respawn. You go, fucking hell, okay, right, now I've got to go and get some guns or whatever. Like it just didn't feel like there was any kind of real punishment to it, an incentive to behave in that way. But yeah, it's there, but I just didn't really. I just found it a bit weird. Like it's kind of just on the periphery of the game for me. But there's some people that do want that realism, but it was just a bit weird. But yeah, the driving in general. So as I understand, there are two different modes for driving. There's kind of a more assisted mode, and then there's like a simulation mode. Now, I didn't have it on simulation. I had it on this default kind of assisted mode. But the car's handle, I'm not saying, diabolically, there's no other word for it. They're just fucking sliding around.
They're not designed to go 80 miles per hour, and they're letting you go 80 miles per hour around corners.
But not accounting for the fact that
they're like fucking tanks.
Yeah, like and they're just like
horrible
slidey boats is how I would kind of describe it. And again, maybe deliberate, but when you've played so much GTA, you kind of want to have fun with the cars. And I felt like I could never really have fun because I was always just trying to keep the fucker from not hitting another car. And the AI on that fucking game is so thick that they're just pulling out all the time. You think you ain't gonna pull out.
That's accurate to real life, mate. You've been on these roads around here. You see people doing that all day.
I know, but it's on a game you expect some consistency from the AI, and it's just the whole thing's just carnage. So you're trying to go down a street straight, and then all of a sudden some fuck pulls out, and you go, "What are we doing here?" And you span out, and you've run someone over, and you've got the police on you, and I just found it just terrible. And like, you are a driver, right? That's your role. That's where you started off. You were the cabbie. You're hired because you are the kind of best driver. And you find you want to really enjoy the chases and fleeing and stuff like that. But I found driving stressful. Like, I'd get clipped by the police, and it's almost impossible to recover from it. Like, there's just no way you can recover control or get up to speed to get away again. And find yourself. You got to find these fucking random jumps that seem to have no logical. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and there's like gaps as well. It's weird, like I don't know what that was all about.
So you need to find one of these jumps to get away from them that for some reason you can jump over, but the police get all snarled up on
doing it.
Yeah, and I found that element of it a bit strange. But yeah, I just like the main way that you explore that world is through driving, and I just feel like they could have just made it a bit more fun in some way. Like and a bit less of an arduous hassle, which is what sometimes I found it. And then trying to control that and at times trying to shoot as well and keep that on, it's just like unnecessarily challenging, I would say. Like it become more of an inconvenience, and it should have been fun.
Yeah. I have to ask about the infamous. There's a mission where you race a car around a track.
Yes.
And in the original, when it was originally released, it was almost impossible.
Really?
And, yeah, and they eventually patched it to make it more forgiving. But given the driving is like inconsistent at best, how did you find that particular mission? 'Cause it's always a game that those of us that went through the 2002, which was worse, controlled worse, believe it or not, managed to scrape ourselves through. But I remember going through it on this, and I was thinking, this still ain't easy. What I'm doing here, it's still a fucking hassle and a headache and a horse shit. 'Cause I'm not used to driving this thing so quick. Like cars don't have this sort of acceleration, and one wrong move and you've fucking blown it, and you're in the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I did a couple of times, right? And I kind of got used to the car, but it took me a couple of goes to get a clean run. And when I did, I didn't find that I was sort of like finding it hugely challenging. It was mainly myself that I was trying to grapple with, because the setting I had it on seemed fine. Like, it didn't seem overly egregious, but yeah, I did, when I was reading up afterwards, this is kind of an infamous racing mission. And at the time, I hadn't really appreciated how infamous it was. But there was like online, there's like loads of like guides that people have made on how to do it. And I was like, why is everyone struggling with this? But yeah, I actually found the car easier to handle because it's a racing car than one of those slugs. And then you get into one of like another car, and it's sort of like fucking coasting around the corner, and you think, is this thing ever gonna get some grip or not? But yeah, I just think they could have. I think they could have made that a bit more fun, is what I would say. I don't think they need to err on the side of absolute authenticity in the way that they did, because
they didn't probably drive that either back then, so no one really knows. That's probably not even accurate. They've just sort of made it as how you would think it might drive, so they've just gone, we'll make them drive like garbage, because that's how we think people interpret driving back then, when in reality they might have been fine. Yeah,
I mean, it just didn't feel good to me, I think, broadly. So yeah, didn't much care for combat, didn't much care for the driving. And I said it just got an element of there's like, it just feels old. It didn't feel like a 2020 game. It felt old, despite it being a ground-up remake. Like, it's not like they got it and sort of added the mechanics set and sort of spruced up the graphics. Like, they had the chance.
Inherit any of the code. They made it from scratch, so they had all opportunity to do anything they wanted, gameplay-wise or feel-wise.
Yeah, and it felt like the controls felt very basic. It felt very loose. It just felt old to me. And I noted that perhaps that was intentional in some way to give the people that played the original the nostalgia that they might have wanted. But because I never played that, I don't get any nostalgia. I just go, well, this is just garbage. Like, this doesn't feel like a modern game to me.
Look, you got Resident Evil 2 out there, and you got Resident Evil 2 Remake. At no point did I want Resident Evil 2 Remake to have fucking tank controls for nostalgia. Like, it's just nonsensical in modern. If you're going to do a modern version of it, do a modern version of it. Don't be trying to have one foot in the past. Like, keep the structure, keep the elements that make it kind of unique or special. But you don't have to. The gameplay can be completely ripped up and changed, because it wasn't good back then. It wasn't. No. Even back then, it was like, this is arduous to play, but we didn't really know any better to a certain extent. It was just kind of like another hard 3D game that just was a bit clunky. Whereas you're right, in this one, it's not fluid at all, really. So it makes you wonder whether there was an element of that, or they thought, this is good enough. The old crowd will just think this is an upgrade, whatever the weather.
Yeah, this is what I mean. It just, to me, I was just sort of like, and this is what I mean. After playing it, I had to go away and understand why it was the way it was. And you just kind of don't want to be doing that. You want to just go, okay, I enjoyed that. That was good. Glad they did that game. But because I knew it was a remake of some sort. Like, I knew it wasn't like a brand new game. I'm not an idiot. So I was like, why why have they made it like this? Is there some reason? But I can only assume that it's kind of some sort of intentional nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
But I didn't much care for it, to be honest. So the next thing is, as I've kind of alluded to already, it's story progression. So there's no side quests, and it is a linear game in every way, despite it kind of looking like, or I wrote on here like positioned in a bit of an open world style. I don't know if it is positioned like that or whether that's just an assumption that I made, but it seems like a waste to make such a nice and inviting world to explore and not give you opportunities really with a purpose in the game to explore. And I think that just felt weird to me. Like I was expecting a main quest that I'd progress with the Mafia, and I was expecting some sort of side stuff, but there was no side. It's just a linear game, which I've put it as a con, and I liked the story, but I've just come to expect a bit more from that sort of game, I think, or that world. I've just expected more from it.
It's interesting because if they had presented it in just I'm trying to think of an example now, something like, I don't know, The Last of Us, where it's a linear game, this wouldn't even be on the criticism list. It is what it is, a story. But because they've done all this backdrop, it's getting crapped on. Now, unfortunately for you, the major counter towards this particular outlook is that there is a little game out there, little known game out there called Mafia 3, which is the third entry into this franchise, and it's the first one to embrace the open world elements. So you've got side quests, you've got you can even take over like zones and things like that. It's bases to raid. There's all this side content into it. Unfortunately, I would say widely considered the worst Mafia game on entry, and it's not because of any major fault. It's just because the open world elements are so boring. Yeah. So in that game, you can go out and do all that stuff, but it's crap. And whoever's in control of this franchise doesn't seem to have the teams in place to make a open world game. So everyone was calling on Mafia 1, Mafia 2 in particular. People were like, well, why is it set like this? Why is it so restrictive? And then they went in and did it. Went, well, here you go. Here's what you wanted. And it's easily the worst in the franchise. And the unfortunate thing about that one, it's got a great story again, but it's so boring and bloated because it tries to lean into these open world aesthetics or these trappings, I guess. Now, obviously, you can make a great open world game and it's not a problem, but my point is they haven't got the chops here to do it, clearly demonstrated. And
I don't think it needs it, though. Again, I think going back to my pros, like I like the story. I like that element of it. I just don't understand why they've gone to the bother, if you like, of creating this open world to do it in. And I think that's why. Well, because why? Like, when you're playing the mission, who's going, oh, I've got to go and get so and so from here, or I've got to go, oh, I'll just go round another route for no apparent reason. Let's go via the airport, or let's go.
I don't think they want you to do that though.
Yeah, but
they want you just to go. It is a backdrop. I think you're not the only person to say this. This is a common criticism, and I just say, well, it ain't an open world game.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. Which is, I'm okay with it, but I just feel like I'm disappointed that.
Well, having played Mafia 3, you ain't disappointed. I can tell you that because it's triple the length and half as good. And
I mean, look,
that's what happened. And everyone who's like me, who played 1 and 2 OGs, we had to sit there and wait for that crap to be wheeled out, and it was garbage in every sense of the word. So then we lost our little narrative mobster games that were nice and tight, nice and digestible, with this beautiful, city backdrop, which you don't really engage with, but it's there. It's just adds a bit of immersion there. And instead we were running around fucking hacking bases and taking over territories.
Yeah,
and
I don't want that. Like, I don't want like
what they're after.
A fucking Assassin's Creed.
I do think they could do more in this game in terms of, like I said, there's stuff missing they've cut out which are a bit more mundane, that add a bit of texture to it. They're more what you'd more consider a side story. Like,
I just think I'd have welcomed a little bit more to flesh stuff out. Like, it doesn't have to be like in an open world format, but I just feel like
tower and unlock the map.
Like, just something that gives me a reason to go and explore a bit is all I'd be asking for. And I think, I don't know if it's my fault, but I kind of... What?
The solution is you go and do you start off and it's like, here's mission 2, and it's like, come on Tommy, let's go. You go and do mission 2, and at the end they're like, okay, mission 2's done, see you later Paulie, bye Sam, bye Don, have a cigar on me. And then rather than it just taking you to the next story element and you go back to, the conversation you're having or going straight to the next mission, it's like, if you want to move on, go home. If not, go and explore. So there's a choice that you can make as a player. It's like, do I want to just get to the next story beat, or should I go and explore the city? And maybe there's like side things you can do or bump into, or I don't know, whatever. Then that way, if I just want to crash through the story, I can. But for those that want to explore the city more, you could put some... Okay, I don't know what you'd put in necessarily as activities, but you could just drop some interesting things for people to go and do, and then they could go off and do it.
Have dinner with your wife, or go and meet Paulie for a drink, or just optional little stuff on the side that would let you have a chat with characters that would flesh it out a little bit more.
No mobile phones, though. They can't be calling you up going, Tommy!
I left a note saying I'll be at so-and-so if you want to meet. I just think I come away wanting a bit more. I thought one of the best things about the game was the setting, and I just didn't have a reason other than liking the setting to properly...
What if Ralph left you a note? Would you go and see him? He went, come visit my bed 6. It's all we can afford. They're not paying him much by the sounds of things.
I don't know.
Or would you skip that one and go, I'm going home to the wife?
There was just a couple of people. I felt like they did an okay job with Paulie and Sam, but I think, as I said, Vinny, his wife's dad, I can't remember her name now. His name is annoying me. And
he little bastard.
Yeah, but just a couple. This is what I mean. It's not like I want them to build out 10 extra characters. Just flesh out a little bit of the more peripheral ones slightly, and give me an excuse to drive around and do something outside of it, as you say. But the way that it progressed, you kind of are forced into just doing... Yeah,
it doesn't give you any time. It's going to present it to you and you do it and that's it. Yeah. There's no agency. So having some sort of downtime... I think having some sort of downtime would be good, and the optional stuff that you can do. The trouble is, because the narrative's... I guess it goes through a certain timeline or series of events... You'll have people crying. So I didn't go and visit Ralphie on the 3rd mission. Why can't I go and visit him in the 8th mission? It's like, it's 10 years later, mate. Like, either do it now or you lose the... And people cry about that. Whereas I'd be like, well, tough shit. Move on with your life.
I just think there's...
there's more to be had.
There's a little bit more they could have done. And not everyone will want that. I'm probably in the... I'm probably just in the minority with that. So
I think you're in the majority of people that hadn't played one before. Like, if you were there in the OG, there's few of us. It's not many of us that actually don't mind the way it's set up. But I do agree that Mafia 3 is too far the other way. Mafia Definitive Edition is probably too far the other way. There is a way to do it and give some sort of choice, and then not bog down people that don't care about it. Like you would in any open world game. This is optional. And if you want to just move on to the next mission, you just go home and it just transitions to the next story beat. Or, so there's a couple of activities you can do in the evening or the day or whatever time of day it is. And yes, they're contexted around that certain time of the character and the narrative. So if you don't do them, you won't see them again. But I think that's okay. I think that's perfectly fine to give that player the choice. And you can always just use like a chapter fucking select and go back to it if you've miss something like that. But it's always a point of contention because of the way it's set up, and people always see it as a bit of a waste. And I do understand that, but when they went for it full blooded, it was just not. It weren't Mafia anymore. It was like, well, what are we? It makes me wonder what they're doing in this old country. I think I heard they were sticking to the OG formula in some way, which is promising, but I don't even know who
I'd be
fucking
fine with
develops these
that.
games anymore. They've been passed around so many times. They're all at
Yeah,
it,
like
messing
this.
around.
This was completely done by someone else as well. I think it wasn't done like by the original studio or anything. It was just
Nah.
a remake by someone else. But yeah. So the linearity of it with the backdrop of the open world was just a bit of a weird one for me. This is probably slightly unfair, but there's zero character customization or like anything.
Bloody hell, Hangar 13 did this one. They did Mafia 3 and they're going to do the new one. And in between they've done Topspin
Real.
2K25. So, I mean...
They've got a real pedigree.
Well, they've got one shitter, one, what I would say, this... Well, you've got a different opinion maybe, but this is okay. And now they're being handed the keys to this newest entry. So at least they've got plenty of feedback, let's say that, to make sure the old country is up to snuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, waffling.
That's all right. Good to know. So yeah, there's like zero customization or ability to do anything with your character other than just play with him. There's kind of a weird addition where you can collect and store cars in a garage. And I was like, why? I just didn't get that at all. I was like, oh, maybe this will like play out as something to do throughout the game. And to your point, you kind of get introduced to Ralph and he's there and then just disappears and you just never hear from him again. And I'm like, well, why have you bothered this whole bringing Ralph into it if he's not relevant at all? But yeah, you can kind of store cars, but you can change the color of them, I think. But yeah, I just a little bit more customized. Yeah, it just felt like it was just a weird addition and made me think, well, if you're putting that in, like I should be able to like do something with Tommy, like to customize either what he's wearing or there was just nothing there. And I just felt like in games you can do something like that nowadays. Like I don't mean to hark back to it, but like God of War, like you can do stuff with your armor and there's some sort of interoperability with that. I just felt like there was something that was there that was missing that would like go to Tommy's wardrobe and you can like do something with him. But
get one of those awful cut-off ties that people chain link that I was being made to wear the other week.
I don't know who's getting those.
Not back then. They definitely weren't. They were dressed smart back then.
They
were
the
slops that are being wheeled out now. Just quickly, Illusion Softworks did the original. Then they were acquired by Take-Two Interactive and renamed 2K Czech. Okay. Then what's it saying here? So they did Mafia 2, then were basically merged into 8 people were merged into Hangar 13 and said, you're going to California, you're not living in Czech Republic or whatever it's called now.
So that was that.
And that was that. So Hangar 13 kind of succeeded them. I don't know if anyone from the original team's still there, but they've been gobbled up basically. And then the franchise has been staying in Take-Two's pocket so they can do what they want with it. They've obviously entrusted Hangar 13 to carry on. Anyway, history lesson. Probably not even accurate.
So a little bit more customization I think would have been nice just to immerse you a little bit more. I've alluded to the police presence kind of under the driving bit. I put on here motorbike mission, right? And I don't know if you remember this fucking motorbike, but I've never handled a vehicle in any game that's handled as poorly as this motorbike did. And apparently that was an addition for this game. It wasn't on the original.
They didn't have any motorbikes.
And I don't know why on God's green earth they added it and who signed it off, because I cannot believe that this was in there. The mission was fine, but the motorbike handling is like nothing I've ever experienced before. And I thought I had to mention it because it's stuck in my brain since I played it. And it bothered me at the time. It was just fucking horrible. And I just didn't want it. I didn't need it and I hated it. So I just literally, I put on my notes, the controls were absolutely horrendous and don't know how that got signed off. And that's what I fundamentally stick to. So that was definitely a con. And the last thing I've put down here, and I don't know if you remember this, but I've kind of put health packs as a thing, right? And broadly, I would say the way that you heal in this game is just fucking shite.
How is it? I can't remember how you do it now.
They put medicine cabinets throughout the mission.
Yeah, okay.
So
Yeah.
you have to go to a medicine cabinet, and you might only be like a little bit, like in the say you've lost a fifth of your health, and you have to go to the medicine cabinet, and it just heals you, right? And then you go, right, well, now I've got to get through there's no other way of healing. You're just relying on these medicine cabinets being put in the right place. And in this day and age, I expect a more dynamic way of healing in a game. I expect you to be able to have some sort of health pack, or like whatever you do, you should be able to should be able to heal on the fly. Like that to me was just fucking shit. And I can't believe I'm doing that in a game that's made in 2020. I just didn't get it. Like from moment one to
blame Doom for that. They were normalising just picking up health packs when those enemies drop them. That's it in armour.
Again, like there's no drops from enemies other than ammo. Like there's no drops of health. Like you literally I'd clear out an area and then go, right,
where's that
looking
medicine
around,
cabinet?
where's that medicine cabinet? And then just try and utilise it. But then sometimes I'd get into a battle and there's no medicine cabinet. So I'm like, literally I'd have like a sliver of health and just be waiting for it to recover to a certain point before I could poke my head up. Just trying not to die in this mission and just sort of taking pot shots and stuff. I just found the health regen and the health pack situation, again, just a bit bizarre and outdated for a 2020 game. And for something that I'm playing in 2024, it felt fundamentally poor. So didn't like that. I thought that was a bit crap. So they're the cons. That's the list, full list. Combat, driving, feels old, story progression, customization, police presence, motorbike mission, and health packs.
Not good. I have to ask you about one specific mission. I might be misreading. I'm sure there's a stealth mission at some point.
Yeah, there's a couple of elements.
Because that was one thing. I was like, what are we doing here?
Is that the one where you're going around the warehouse?
Yeah.
I mean, I weren't enjoying that, as you full well know. But I basically, I mean, it's very, I would say, primitive in its approach. And basically, I just went around and just took everyone down. I found a way that, again, the AI is so thick, like in the way that it operates, that I found it quite easy to sort of go around and take people down stealthily. So it wasn't too bad, but again, like and I've said it before on previous reviews of games that I've played, where it's a combat game, like, and it encourages combat, and then randomly decides to include a stealth mission.
Yep.
And I just fucking hate it. I just don't know why games do it.
Deal with it.
I had to redo that. And there is a mechanic in this game as well, which I found odd, for picking up bodies and moving them. And I was just like, why? So in that stealth mission, I found myself doing it, but I didn't really need to do it. But I used it because I was like, it must be here for a reason. I thought I don't want to get caught out with it. But I didn't find it too bad, but I was a bit as soon as when you go, I see where this is going. It's kind of like, I'll go and find the cases and don't alert anyone and don't shoot your gun. I was like, right, stealth mission, excellent, just what I needed. But it took me 2 or 3 goes, but it wasn't too bad. But again, it's not a con, but I don't know why games do it. I think it's unnecessary.
Any other business?
I don't think so. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. I think the vibe of the game's great, but I think there's a lot of things in it that just fundamentally feel aged to me, which kind of drag it down a little bit.
That's fair enough. Let's get to the gallery then, the formalities. Mafia Definitive Edition. I said it can go in the gallery. You can get the keys out and go in there and then award it some sort of tier or whatever you'd call those awards. An award, I guess. Or you can go in the self-storage outside with some of the other dross that's been played, completed, and not worthy of going in the gallery. So what's your choice? Do we go in or are we staying out?
Yeah, I think I'll put it in. I think,
It's in. It's
despite
made
everything
it.
I've said, I have
Scrape
kicked it,
through.
but it does scrape itself in, yeah.
Okay. Platinum, gold, silver, or bronze. That's now the choice. I mean, I think there's only one option here, but maybe you'll surprise me.
Yeah, no, there is only one option, so it's a bronze for me,
Yep.
for sure. I think, I'm tempted to put it in self-storage, and I have to be honest,
Yeah.
like it is a close call for me. But I think fundamentally, like the as I alluded to at the beginning, like the portion of the pros really do outweigh the negatives, and I think those negative bits, I think if it had had some better combat
Yeah.
and like mainly better combat and better driving, like it gets itself up a lot easier. Like some of the other nitpicking bits are kind of like more just that, like fun nitpicking, but fundamentally, like I liked the key parts, the narrative, the story, the environment were all really good. And I would say to someone, like, it's definitely worth a playthrough for like 12, 13 hours. It's fundamental. I enjoyed playing it, but just wanted and expected a bit more to kind of get it up in the kind of silver and golds.
That's fair. That's where I put it. I just checked back in 2021 or whenever it was.
Yeah.
Earned itself a bronze, so it hasn't moved the knee. It hasn't gone down, I guess, which I suppose is a positive for those guys. One final question. Is there any desire to go and tackle Mafia 2 and or 3 off the back of Definitive Edition?
Potentially, but I don't know what the ages of those games are. And
Older than this.
yeah, so I don't unless
2010 for Mafia 2,
no,
2016 for Mafia 3. Now, yeah, Mafia 2 will be a worse playing version than this. There is a definitive version that was released, but apparently that's fucking garbage. So they ballsed up on that. So that's not even the definitive way to play that. And then Mafia 3, as I said, is... I don't know. I mean, the cars definitely handle a bit better because they're a bit more modern, but you then got all the trappings of the open world in there. And there is some threads between them narratively. They're small. They're actually quite cool, but yeah, I don't think will be necessary for this old country that's coming because that's a prequel anyway. So you would imagine knowing the Dons in this one and going back to the old country, I'd imagine it's more tied into that than it would be 2 or 3. But yeah,
I hope
mean,
so, because there is an interesting kind of like story that this alludes to between Morello and Salieri, and I was kind of hoping that might touch on that.
might be their granddads going out.
But unless they do something to update it, I might have a look at the Mafia 2 one definitive edition. But
Mafia 2 at the time
it.
was good, but
Yeah.
it was, was letting things off the hook for all sorts of things back then. I think you play it 14, 15 years later, you'd be like, what were they doing? Okay,
I don't think I'd enjoy it ultimately. But I enjoyed my time on it. But I'm glad in a weird kind of way that it wasn't longer, because I was getting a bit tired of that combat, especially after like the prison mission and stuff. I was just getting a bit fed up of it. The Tommy gun is good fun. Like, I definitely think if you come across that, have a good go with that, because that's the way to do business. But yeah, I was getting a little bit like sick of driving around and chases and stuff like that. So it was wearing on me a bit. But overall, I enjoyed it.
Fair enough. A bronze for Mafia Definitive Edition. And we are going to bolt on a quick thoughts and grading or self-storage of Jusant, which I played earlier this year and handed out a gold for. You, off the back of that, seem to sniff around and get interested. Another Game Pass jobby, I assume.
Yeah.
You played through it. High-level thoughts, and where's it going to go? Is it going to make its way into the gallery?
Yeah, it took me a little while. I probably played this 3 to 6 months ago, maybe.
Don't tell them that.
It was a little while ago.
Keep it under wraps.
But it took me a little bit of time, I would say, to get into it. It wasn't one that I initially... I mean, put it this way. If you hadn't said to me and given it the rating that you did and sort of done the review together, I probably wouldn't have picked it up.
Yeah.
I found it a little bit. That was probably the wrong word, but I was struggling to get into it. I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing this for. I didn't really sort of get into the purpose. But as I sort of started to get into some of the mechanics and figure out how I was sort of progressing through the world, so I think I was just really worried at the start about missing something. Like, because the story is ultimately you're trying to figure out what happened there and picking up notes and trying to sort of scrape your way through the story. I was like, well, I don't want to miss any of that because without that, I feel like I'd be struggling a bit. But in the end, I just kind of got enjoyment out of the traversal of the world and figuring out where to go and traversing it. And that part I started to enjoy a bit more. And I thought it was a relaxing in the end, sort of about 8 to 10 hours or so of gameplay. That I quite liked. It's not my typical, I would say, kind of cup of tea. And I definitely felt that as I went through it, I did 9.5 hours in this. Yeah, so bang on, sort of 8 to 10 hours. I was a bit more blasé, I would say, with my approach to because I kind of just wanted to get through it. I was like, I just want to understand where we're going here. Yeah, I liked the environments and I liked kind of the progression of the game. I thought it was an interesting little playthrough. And as I say, it kind of a nod back to the ancestors that were there and trying to figure out what had kind of happened there was interesting. I can't really recall anything. There was a couple of times when I got fucking stuck on a puzzle. And I say a puzzle. Puzzle's probably the wrong way to put it, but couldn't figure out some of the environments to traverse. And there was one particular point where I was getting quite annoyed, and I ended up texting you, going, "What the fuck am I doing?"
I can't remember, could I?
You couldn't remember, but in the end, I was like, I figured it out. I figured it out pretty quickly after that. But it's one of those things where I was like, I know I need to go up here, but I don't quite know how to do it. And some of them take a little bit of kind of like finagling. That's the only word I can think of. I don't even know if that is a word, but like understanding how the game works and how it wants you to do things, I guess.
Got to do that wall running and make sure the rope's long enough, otherwise you won't get high enough. There is a little bit of fiddling sometimes of trying to get the setup right, because you think you'll try it once and your rope was too short and you go, well, that's not the way to do it, when actually you just needed to lengthen the rope slightly so you got more arc and momentum.
Yeah, but it's, I think fundamentally, like, the key part of the game is, like, obviously the traversal. Like, they've obviously come up with this traversal system that they liked and then put a purpose around it, or a loose purpose around it. But I quite liked it. I quite liked the progression. There's kind of different biomes. I think there's 4 or 5 different biomes, so it kind of splits it all out. And I thought the ending part was like the nicest little bit, where you kind of like find yourself in a cool little environment and progression arc that I quite liked there. So yeah, overall, I quite liked my time on it, to be honest. It was a nice little, let's say, palate cleanser traversal game with no stress, really, other than just figuring out how to traverse the environment. Yeah.
So what are we going to do with it? Self-storage, yeah?
No, so it's not self-storage. I liked it.
Mafia's got away with it. This ain't going to be self-storaged.
No, it's not a self-storage game. It's a nice little game. I liked it.
Yeah.
I can't say that I felt. I don't think I liked it as much as you did. I still enjoyed my time in there. So it's a bronze for me. It'll go in that little bronze pile.
Jusant gets itself a bronze. Well, there you go. That will do for another episode of Idle Game Chat, as some people say. Guess we'll be back when the next games are reviewed or completed. That metaphor is going to be long, so I don't know when I'll be off the hook for that. Well, I say that I'm playing another game alongside it almost all the time now, so there will be stuff slowly churned out. I've got a bit of a workflow I'm working through with shorter games. Still haven't finished Astrobots. That's really like the game at the moment that's alongside it. And once that's
surprised
done,
you haven't done that yet.
Well, it was getting played alongside Persona 3, and it just wasn't getting. I'm not overexposing myself to it. Not that the game necessarily gets boring. It's just that I'm like, I don't want to just pile through this and rush it. I've probably taken the too much of a cavalier or casual approach, I should say, like feet upped it too much. But I'll literally sometimes log on. I'll sometimes boot it up, play one level, and then just go, yeah, that's me done, and walk away like happy. Like I'm purposely sort of pulling it short. So I don't think it's not even a particularly long game, I don't think, but I'm playing it quite thoroughly with the intention of trying to get all those little bots. So as and when they're available, rather than just sort of pile driving through it and then going back and finding stuff, I'm sort of doing it as I go. And
still scarred from the end of Astro's Playroom. I'd love to play through it, but I've still got that unfinished. Pretty sure I left it unfinished when I got the PS5, and it's bothered me. But until I've done that mission, I'm not going to mission level. I'm not going to go and get it.
No, but so that's what's getting done there. So there will be some smaller games, or even like bigger games, stuff like Silent Hill 2 I want to play. So that'll probably... What I think will happen with Metaphor, I've been doing it wrong really with these big games. They've been given the focus, right, being like the long game. In my head, I'm like, yeah, give the 100-hour game the focus. But actually, that should be the thing you chip away at over many months. Really,
possibly,
it's always going to be there. So I might swap the priorities in the next few weeks and start to maybe play that twice a week rather than that being the 3 or 4 timer. So we'll see. I'm talking shit, so could be a complete lie. I probably won't finish anything for the end of the year, you know me, and that'll be another 3 months lost. Anyway, enough waffle. Nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.